Hello, podcast listener. This episode is all about my opinions on the Rescuers Down Under, and then we touch in a little bit on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So if you're in for a little nostalgia grab, this one's going to be right up your alley. We also talk about how when Tucker dies, I'm going to take care of his body. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
Tucker, nipples aren't perfect.
They aren't.
They just won't be. They never will be. And that's why you'll always be able to tell if it's a Terminator or a human being.
Yeah.
So
especially
like,
the position and placement.
Yes.
How many there are.
There's a world where once we start fighting the robots, we're going to have to get into our underground like human resistance, and you'll have to show them your nipple to get in. They'll be like, show me your nip.
It'll be like a form of currency.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be your ID, right?
Like someone dies on the side of the road. Don't forget to take their nipples with, because
yes,
we could turn those in at the next way station
and
for some gasoline.
You certainly don't want the robots to get a hold of the nipples and go from there.
No.
I want to talk to you about a movie that made me cry the other day. And clearly I'm going through some emotions because I don't know why it should make me cry. But I had an evening to myself. Jill went up to go visit her folks, and I said, you know what I'm going to have for dinner? Chinese food. The Chinese food I want. So I called up the Great Wall, and they were like, who's this? And I'm like, it's JJ. And they're like, oh, JJ, what are you having? Double cooked pork? And I said, no, Kung Pao chicken. And I love Kung Pao chicken. It's nice and spicy. Makes your like eyes water. And I'm like, and then I need a side of egg rolls, and I need a side of the amazing like pork wontons. So like, okay. And I'm like, and lots of sweet and sour sauce. They're like, we got you, JJ. So
We got you, fam.
And when I went to pick it up, they're like, we forgot to ask you if you wanted steamed rice or fried rice. So we just gave you both.
Look at that.
And I'm like, thank you so much.
They mix it together.
They didn't. No. That'd be the worst, that you'd have like disappointing fried rice, right? Like you just want one or the other. So I get home and I'm like, I get to pick whatever I want to watch while I eat my Chinese food. This is glorious. This is amazing. This never happens.
It's like a Friday night with an N64 in 1995.
Bingo. Which reminds me, I also have a beef.
If it was out then, I think
I'm
it was.
gonna quickly bring this up. I ordered a lot of Domino's pizza in my life. A lot. Okay.
Which is a weird choice.
Not really, because we had a Domino's right by our house. And so like we were in the delivery area. Do you remember when delivery areas were a thing? And so 232-5333. That was the phone number to get a hold of Domino's near my house. And so I would order Domino's pizza. And I think it's because they ordered Domino's in the very first Ninja Turtles movie.
Oh,
but
sure.
This is my beef. It's with the Turtles. How long do you think the Turtles were at the farmhouse recuperating in the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie?
Oh, I mean, at most a week.
At most a week, right?
Yeah.
So during that time, Danny has been hiding out in their sewer layer, using it as his like bachelor pad. And when they arrive home, Danny's like, oh, there's some pizza. And what do they find on that pizza, Tucker? Penicillin, aka mold. It takes way longer than a week for Domino's pizza to mold.
Oh, specifically
so
Domino's
longer.
pizza?
So much longer. I mean, I'm saying like, I swear I pulled a Domino's pizza out from under my bed once that had been there for over a month. No mold. Because it was, I mean, it's mainly, you know, like cured meats that are on top of it. So,
well, maybe they were longer for there than a week, because they never specify.
Jill thinks it's because they were in a sewer.
Oh, it could be. It could be. That would actually make a lot of sense.
The growing conditions are just right for mold.
Absolutely.
I don't think so,
because it was pizza that Danny had brought down there. Like, and I don't know, he must not have gotten it delivered there like they do.
Like they do.
He probably went and got it and brought it down.
Danny's dumb.
Why?
He's just a dumb kid.
He's a messed up kid. He's going through some shit.
Nope, he's a dumb
He's
kid.
stealing money from April. His dad's is just an inattentive jerk.
I don't think so. I think his dad's trying.
Do you think his dad's divorced?
Yeah,
or
definitely.
a widower?
Yeah, because I think at one point there's kind of this weird thing of like you feel like maybe he's hitting on April just a little bit.
Does he say something about? No, he never says anything about his mom, about Danny's mom.
No.
But April does say your father's going to have kittens. When she finds Danny in the sewer, she goes, "Oh my God, your father's gonna have kittens." I love that line. It makes zero sense.
Zero sense.
No sense whatsoever. I also remember as a kid, I had no idea that Casey Jones thought Donatello had called him gay. He
That was
says
a
when he says
revelation
you're
for
a
you?
claustrophobic, right? And he thinks, "What are you talking? I've never even looked at another guy before."
Yep.
As a kid, I had zero idea what they were talking
You just
about.
learned so much. Okay, going back to me
Favorite
crying.
movie of all time. Sorry, that is my favorite movie
Really?
of all time.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah, without a doubt,
So
no question. 100%.
I've got streaming services. I literally have millions of movies that I can watch, and I chose something that I think is probably one of the best movies, animated films of all time, which is The Rescuers Down Under. And for those of you who don't know, here's an interesting little tidbit. So The Rescuers comes out, I think, in 1978, and it's got the voices of Eva Gabor and
Bob Newhart?
Bob Newhart, and it was a huge hit, and it centers around the fact that mice have a secret underground society called the Rescue Aid Society, and these mice provide like UN style help to children in need across the world. And so these two mice are teamed up. They go help this little girl who's being forced to go into an underground cave along a beach where water fills in and like there's treasure, and it's Madame Medusa and she's evil, and Snipes is this big, fat dude who's like Medusa. But so the sequel is about Bernard and Bianca going to help a little boy in Australia. Now, here's what I think is really interesting. In this world, they don't really explain it, but there are children who can talk to animals, who can understand when animals speak, and they never get into it. And I love that. I love that they don't explain that they've got a special gene, or kids who have need can talk to animals. They just,
Midichlorians.
it's there, right? And so the first 10 minutes of The Rescuers Down Under involve the opening logo and then this long shot where you're just flying like along the top of flowers towards something way off in the distance. And it was the first movie to be ever digitally fully created. And so while hand-drawn animation is used, they used computers to fill in the ink and to do the outline tracing. They did some modeling that included.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that was the deal to be able to make this movie with the folks at Disney, is they had to be able to use this CAPS project, computer animated like profile software or something like that. And this CAPS software goes on to form Pixar, and it had only been used in like commercial applications beforehand. So like a Listerine that like is a knight in a commercial. And when you watch this movie, it is striking. Like there's a definite difference in how it looks, and it looks richer and more detailed, but it still has that hand-drawn quality. And this is what amazes me about it. I'm going to talk about three different distinct things. So this long tracking shot, you're going over these flowers, and you know they're coming at you, and they're going past the camera, and all that's done with the camera or with the computer. And by today's standards, you'd be like, well, that looks a little cheesy, but it's not bad, right? So, and then you end up on this little house. In the house, all of a sudden you hear like a didgeridoo, like a whoa, and a little boy who's sleeping in a hammock in his bedroom wakes up, and he grabs his backpack and he heads out the door, and his mom, who used face you never see, goes, "Cody, where you going? Breakfast." And she goes,
She's got a Cockney accent.
well, she's got like that Australian, like, "Cody." And he's like, "I've got some sandwiches in me pack, Ma."
Again, that's definitely not Australian.
Well, yeah, Australia was formed by like the British, so it's got a in fact, in their flag, it still has a British flag. Like, "Cody." I nailed it, man. I nailed that one. Cody. So the kid goes off, and he starts waking up other animals while he goes, and he finds a kangaroo who's like who says the Marahute, the great golden eagle, has been captured by a poacher's trap. And so they need the boy to help them free the eagle. He climbs this giant butte, and Marahute never talks to him like that. He doesn't talk back and forth. You kind of get the feeling that Marahute understands what he's saying, but the eagle doesn't speak to him, which is a great choice. Great choice. The eagle also looks a little more like natural, whereas like, you know, the kangaroo has big like Disney eyes and, you know, has facial expressions and things like that. So he's able to like, and the eagle's tied down with these ropes. He's cutting the ropes, and the eagle's kind of bucking, and he does the last rope and he goes, "You're free." And the eagle spreads its wings and knocks him off of this butte, and he's falling back. No. And then all of a sudden, like whoosh, and the eagle flies underneath him and like kind of like lets him sit on her back. And you then experience this 4-minute sequence where they are flying over the Australian countryside. They're interacting, you know, like at one point, like it grips him with his talons and like lets him like ski on the water. And it's this moment, you know, this amazing moment where like the animal understands that the human helped him and like, you know, he's taken along. And then to show how much she appreciates it, the Marahute takes him and shows him her eggs, which are on like a cliffside halfway down the cliff. And you're also at one point introduced to the character of McLeach, voiced by George C. Scott, in an amazing, he does such a good job. And it turns out that McLeach becomes the basis for almost every Disney villain for like the next 10 years. So his facial expression and the way he kind of like he lies to characters becomes like Gaston, right? Like he's got the same kind of chin as Gaston, and it just goes on and on. And you know, the in Pocahontas, the Lord who comes and is anyway. And so the little boy ends up getting captured by McLeach, like helps Marahute escape, but the little boy gets captured and he's like, "You're a poacher. I'm going to tell the Rangers." And so this little mouse ends up like realizing like it's being used as bait to catch something in a poacher's trap. And he's like, no, stop, it's trap. And the boy falls down the pit anyway. So this little mouse runs and ends up at like a telegraph office that's run by another little mouse. And what's funny is it's an actual human telegraph office, but the mouse kind of, you know, like has a little thing where they've spliced some wires together so they can use it. And there begins a sequence. Bruce Broughton, the second part of my thing, Bruce Broughton, who's the composer for this, does such an amazing job with the music. I am just dumbfounded at how good the music in this is. You know, it takes that Australian kind of like, you know, the didgeridoo and like a lot of like drum, you know, music and mixes it in with this. So this next sequence is called Relaying the Message. And so this little telegraph mouse like sends it and it goes to the Marshall Islands. And so it's like, oh, the Marshall Islands, very important during World War II. And so there's an old downed World War II plane and you hear like dee 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 dee, and a little mouse like runs up and gets on top of like the you know, the yoke for the plane, and he's listening to it. And so he goes and he does this, and then you see this big pink arrow that like is relaying from Australia to the Marshall Islands, from the Marshall Islands to Hawaii. And in Hawaii, it's like an actual communication center that's being used. And all of a sudden it's like RAS on all these screens. And there's like a dumb guy and he's like pushing buttons. He's like, what's going on? And two of the little mice use semaphore to contact another one. Then they dial a number, like a phone number that rings off. And so the guy is like, oh, and he goes to answer the phone. So then they go over and they're jumping on the little keys because they're little mice, and they find out. And then the message is, you know, like boy trapped, need society now, you know, Australia. And so then they send the signal to Los Angeles, and it's just like ba 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 da 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 ba ba ba, and you watching it goes to Los Angeles, and then it goes to Denver, and then it goes to Chicago, then it goes to Washington D.C., and then it goes to New York City, where they do this shot that's amazing, where like they're just hitting the countries on the map, very much like Indiana Jones. But when it starts to get to New York City, you see the lights of the whole city like light up, and it's just an amazing moment in it. And it's so good, and it gets you captured. You know, the main stars of our movie, you don't see for the first 10 minutes, you know, maybe even longer, maybe even 15 minutes. And then one of my favorite parts happens. So they agreed to this mission with the Rescue Aid Society, and they have to fly out of New York, and it's a horrible winter blizzard. And so they go, and the old Albatross, they fly on an Albatross, who's like an airline. Like that's the thing, is he runs his own airline, and his name was Orville, and it's under new management, and it's his brother Wilbur, because the original voice actor who played Orville had passed away. They replaced him with John Candy.
And don't they use the same character design in Little Mermaid?
Yes. Yeah. The Scuttle is very much the same. I mean, he's a seagull. This is an albatross, but it's very similar. And so you get great John Candy. And so he's asking, he's like, great. You want to go to Australia? That's awesome. He goes, how does April sound? And they're like, no, we need to go tonight. And he's like, tonight. And it's his whole acting. This whole thing is always going, and getting to this high pitched register. But then the flight. So when they finally decide to take off, you can see a moment where I am sure that the animators didn't see the computer as a threat. They said, we can finally do stuff we've always wanted to do, but has been impossible with hand-drawn animation. So he takes off by, leaping off the edge of this New York City building, and then he dives down to build up speed. And so you're watching like the ground come towards you while the apartments and everything are going past. And then he swoops up, and it's sort of this aerial shot that we had never seen in animation before. And I just started thinking while I was watching it about how I bet that the situation was not animators being angry that a new tool was available to them. I bet these animators were so excited that things that they'd always wanted to do but were impossible to do could now be done. For example, that opening shot where you're going, it's this long pull-in shot at a high neck speed. It would be impossible to hand animate that. It just would be so, it would be so tedious and uneconomical. You'd never be able to get a shot like that. Even with the moving plane system that they have, it just wouldn't work. And the moving plane system wouldn't work with the speed that you're trying to get when Wilbur is diving down to the New York City streets. And then they make these CG cars, and it's supposed to, and the other thing too is they use the computer to add snow. And so you don't have to now animate all this stuff over them. It's they told a computer program like snow's going to be whipping in this one direction. And so they can layer that on top of it. The Rescuers Down Under has such an amazing story when it comes to animal ecology and being kind to animals. It tells a story of, like a poacher who's, sees them as just a commodity, doesn't see them as living creatures at all. It's got a human animal relationship in different ways. So McLeach, the poacher, also has it's like a lizard. It's like, it looks like a Komodo dragon, but it's not as big as that. And her name is, oh God, what is it? It's
not Betsy, is it?
No, it's got it's like Josephine. Oh, god darn it. But Frank Welker does the voice, and Frank Welker is just so good when he does voices. Okay, hold on. It's going to drive me nuts until
Sarah.
Sarah. And George C. Scott, here's the thing. He's not doing an Australian accent. He's he's clearly like just a poacher from somewhere else.
Do you remember what order you watched the two Rescuers movies in?
I saw, so I do specifically, because guess what 2 movies this opened up against? It's considered a box office bomb, but has grown a cult following. This movie opened on the same Friday as Rocky V and Home Alone.
Oh.
Yeah, so this movie had no hope.
But I saw Rescuers Down Under before
Joanna.
before I ever saw The Rescuers. So
yes.
As a kid, I just thought there was just The Rescuers Down Under.
Right, because you would have been about 6 years old, and they hadn't released. No, I feel like The Rescuers Down Under is on VHS before Rescuers Down Under is on VHS before Rescuers is.
Sure, yeah.
So for our generation, we just came at the wrong time because it hadn't been re-released and something our parents would have taken us to. So this, I'm guessing this is probably my first interaction with it. And I definitely like Rescuers Down Under more than I like The Rescuers.
I'll have to go watch them again, but I remember watching The Rescuers years later at Mama Luke's house and being like, what? This exists? I had no idea.
I've got another one to watch. This is amazing.
Is this a sequel? If it's a sequel, why is it just called The Rescuers?
I also, it just start to finish, it is beautiful. And when you look at images from it, you can really see how they stretch their muscles with utilizing this for shadowing, stuff like that. And not that I don't like current computer animated stuff, but this was a time when we really could have explored the height of. Have you ever noticed how if you watch a movie that's in black and white from the 50s, everything looks sharper in it?
From the 50s?
Yeah, like before, like when they still made like a movie in black and white because it was, cheaper than the color stuff. And so like a lot of television in that era too, that was still in black and white. It's really crisp and it's, you can really see some rich detail. I think it's because we were at the height of what we could do with exposing black and white film stock. But then it was like, nope, if you're not in color, you're not anything. And we, started, using color. I just feel like we are at the precipice right now where we need to go back to some old school methods and mix those with new school.
One thing I noticed with the movie we just reviewed a few episodes ago, Deadpool and Wolverine, was that watching it on the big screen, it actually doesn't look as good as watching it on a 4K computer monitor. And I don't know what it is that's causing that, but there's a lot of detail I'm losing when I'm watching it on projected screen versus watching it on a computer monitor that's backlit, right, and is made a different way. And I'm wondering how much if that is just an artifacting of it being a digital print that we're watching projected through the air onto a screen versus having a gigantic monitor that could actually play it for us. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we do just get a gigantic monitor in the future, or even some other kind of projection scheme that works a little bit different. You can still get a great, beautiful image, but so many other things can affect that. And I also think there's an additional amount of motion blur that's coming in through the projector in some way because things just look crisper on a monitor.
I was at a movie in the
me at least
in the Twin Cities, and I kept being like, what is this imperfection in the screen? There's something weird, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I had walked in and there was already something playing on, it's rare that you see a screen without an image on it, period, right? Because you walk in and there's usually like pre stuff rolling and things like that, ads and whatnot. And so finally I waited until the end of the movie and I walked up and somebody had clearly taken their soda and threw it on the screen. And so there was, it was a dark brown and it dripped down. And I realized, first of all, that is such a dick move. That is such an, you should be banned from movie theaters for the rest of your life, because what you did in a momentary act of defiance, whether you didn't like the movie or you had bad service or you're just a jerk, now has caused everybody else to have a poor viewing experience. And so I mentioned it to the box office person. They're like, yeah, that happened like a week ago. And there are companies that come and can clean your screens, but it's very expensive.
I would assume so.
Very expensive, right? Because it's not something you do every day. No. So you're talking about getting a specific crew who comes to do that. And I remember as a kid, I went to a movie I went to see Toy Story 2 with a kid who liked to lick the non-nub ends of dots and then throw them at the screen to try and get them to stick. And I remember being like, I don't think we should be friends. And I'm happy to say that we are no longer even acquaintances. I don't even know what's going on in that kid's life at this point.
He's probably in jail.
Probably is.
Where he should be.
Yeah, he's licking a different nub in jail. I also want to talk about pre-planning your funeral is something to just throw out there today. So it's a weird, morbid thought to pre-plan your funeral, right? But a couple of months ago, I got a call from a guy who said, hey, listen, I've heard you speak a couple times. I like what you do. Would you essentially officiate my funeral? And I think I met him once. And so I said, sure. What do I need to know? And he goes, nothing. I'll have stuff written down for you. But and I said, are you okay? Is this something that's coming up? He's like, no, just when it happens. And so I pre-booked myself to officiate a funeral. But have you noticed how people are moving away from having like for sure weddings, but I also think funerals and celebrations of life are moving away from church settings.
Sure.
And people are doing it at parks instead, and all these other places where people felt more connected than just say like a church where that they're
probably. I'm sure it depends on who the deceased was and their relationship with religion.
Like, for example, if tomorrow you got hit by a bus, I would go to your family and be like, this dude does not want a church funeral.
Yeah, they would know that already.
Like
too,
I would hope so, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. Like someone might fight for it. Like there's always someone in the family who's like, well, then he won't get into heaven. And I'm like, don't worry, he's not already.
Yeah,
so
I'm
like
definitely not going there.
That's not an issue.
Yeah,
it's not an issue. But I think of one of the greatest funerals I ever attended was for Matthew Burkholder that you, his friends and family planned, and it was at NDSU, right? No, MSU. NDSU, yeah. And it was a mixture of performance and music and spoken word. It was great. Just right below that is Doug Hamilton's funeral. Doug Hamilton's funeral I thought was wonderful. And that one was at MSUM. And so to me, there's kind of this world of where we need to start thinking about our funerals. And I'll bet you funeral directors talk about that a lot. I bet it's more common nowadays for people to consider like, oh, I'll just do a funeral at the funeral home, right? Because it can provide you that feeling of a congregation if you want, but it can also be a place that's a little more open and just relaxed. It made me think we should have Alex Rydell on again, because think about the change from when we had him on JJ Meets World the first time versus today, and what the world of funerals looks like.
What kind of technologies have come along where you can do other things with your body?
Would you donate your body to science?
No.
Why not?
I want it.
Yeah,
for me. I would want to be in a tomb. I want a tomb.
Do you?
Yeah.
Like
carved into the side of a hill or something.
Oh my!
Right?
Okay.
Hell yeah! Fucking tomb with like an iron gate.
I did not. I did not see that one.
Yes. Hell yes. That'd be awesome.
I was gonna suggest that we grind you up and put you into cookies with large frosting.
As long as they then go into the tomb.
Yeah, the cookies in the tomb, and then 1,000 years from now, they're like, "Oh my God, this must be our Betty
Sprinkle
Crocker
me on a cheesesteak." Yeah, no. Hey,
cheesesteaks. Have you found any new ones? Have you explored any cheesesteaks recently?
There's nothing in town worth devoting time to. I still my go-to at the moment is still Grand Junction.
Yeah.
But the one near me, you don't even have to talk to a human being. You just go and press buttons and you can build your own. And I love that because I like to take things off of what they put on their cheesesteak. So if you're going to go get a cheesesteak in town, go to Grand Junction. But beyond that, don't even bother.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought to yourself, maybe this is your greater calling from the universe, is that you need to open a great cheesesteak place?
Yeah.
Like necessity is the mother of invention, right? So like no cheesesteak is the grandpappy of Tucker's.
Let's be honest. There's no way I have like the work discipline to run a restaurant of any kind.
You don't need to necessarily run it. You just need to be the one to be like, I need to put the right people in the room together and I need to give them my
I need to be the ideas guy.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed how some of the greatest partnerships of all time have somebody who is ultra creative and the other person whose job it is just to kind of reel them back a little bit and like kind of bring reality into the situation?
Who do you think would be an example?
So locally, John Marks and Vicky Shapolis.
Oh, okay.
Right, with Trollwood. On a more like big level, because I'm watching the Imagineering story documentary, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells.
Oh.
So Frank Wells was the president of the Walt Disney Company, and Michael Eisner was brought in to be the chairman of the board. And Michael Eisner would go into these meetings with the Imagineers and like pitch all these like huge ideas. And Frank Wells's job as like the money guy would be like, okay, these two are possible, but these ones can't go. And so they said it was so nice because you had this guy who was ultra creative, and it's not that Frank Wells wasn't, but he was realistic, right? To say, I can't give you $1 billion to figure out magnets. What I can do is I can give you $10 million to, do this, find this technology.
How would you map our dynamic onto this?
I think that you're ultimately the creative driver. I think that you're the tools guy.
You're okay.
You
think you reel me in?
No. I think that we actually share some of those things.
I would say we both are actually that for each other on one level or another.
I'll say this. I think I'm the guy who, if you and I were sitting down, we're like, we want to make a short film about this. And I'm like, why make it a short film? Let's make it a full length.
That's true. In that situation, I would rein you in.
And then you'd be like, let's start with a short and see where we go from there. Right. So yeah. And I think a lot of great like creative relationships, if you have someone who doesn't, it's not poo-pooing the other idea. It's that person who kind of like says, okay, let's take it and bring it back. Even like this, you reined in stuff like when I was in Santaland Diaries, and you're like, listen, throw the spaghetti against the wall and I'll tell you which piece.
Sure.
And there were so many times it was like, I see where you're going with this, but I want you to do this. I want you to give half of what you're doing to this. Mm-hmm. And so I'll always trust your creative eye.
I think Trey Parker, Matt Stone is probably a really good version of that, except that it's like Trey is sort of definitely the leader of the two because he's the one doing the primary bulk.
And I think Matt is that trusted confidant who's gatekeeping for him in a lot of ways. So if someone tries to come and says like, oh, you need to do this, he can be the one to be like, screw off. This man's a genius. You take it or leave it. I also found have you watched any of the Mickey Mouse shorts, the new shorts that have come out like in the last 7 or 8 years?
No, I didn't know there were any.
Oh my God. So they launched, I think it's just called like the Mickey Mouse Show, and you can watch it on Disney Plus. They're not made for, I mean, kids could watch them, but like they're made for our generation. Like
really?
It's very Ren and Stimpy-esque in a lot of ways.
Really?
Oh my God. It is so good. Like there's parts where it's kind of grotesque.
Okay.
And like, like the absurdist humor. I'm going to make you watch one before you leave because they're all in the BDs, like they're all 3 minutes, 4 minutes long. And the one I'm going to make you watch is called Potato Land. You're really going to like it. And but I've been watching them nonstop. And so there's a comedian named Chris, and I'm going to murder his last name, Diamatopoulos. But when they made the Three Stooges movie, he played Mo.
Okay.
In the show Silicon Valley, he played Russ Hanneman, who is the billionaire who invests in that. The 3 Bs. Okay. Tres Comas is the name of his tequila. 3 commas. And I've seen him in some other stuff, and I've always wondered why on Cameo, where you can get a celebrity give you a shout out, he's always like $400, $500. I'm like, why is he so expensive? Well, I found he's the new voice of Mickey Mouse in these shorts.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, well, that makes sense,
totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'll leave you on this. Go check out some of those shorts. They're well worth your time, and like. It's not the stuff like go get a horse, like not that one. It's literally called like the Mickey Mouse Show, and they became so popular that they started a ride. There's a new ride called Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railroad, and it uses these character designs, and it's just wonderful, so good. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. I say I'm going to help you, but pretty much I'm going to just throw you in the trash.